To be a great leader, there's a few things you have to look at. One is results. If you can't deliver results, it's hard to make a claim that you're a great leader. Not just once, not heroically one time, but time after time, quarter after quarter, kind of sustained results. The second thing is it gets into the behaviors because the results we achieve come from the behaviors we take on. You don't improve fitness-wise if you don't get up and go to the gym type of thing or change your diet. Modeling behavior, creating a vision, coaching other people, caring enough about people to set high expectations for them and for yourself. These are all behaviors that truly matter. And then when you dig past behaviors, you get into mindsets, which is how do they see things? Because how we see things often determines what we do, and what we do determines what we get. So their mindset, did they see the world as full of opportunities or full of problems? Do they see everything as every person has potential within them? And my job as a leader is to help bring that out. And then I guess the fourth thing is their character. So results matter, behaviors matter, mindset certainly matters, but who you are really matters. And when you think about character, now you're talking about, do people have confidence in you? Can they trust you? Do you have both the competence and the character to deliver results? So that gets into areas like integrity and loyalty and a commitment to doing the right thing. Those are really critical things as well.
Today's guest is a leader whose career spans elite military service, Fortune 500 consulting, entrepreneurship, academia, and best-selling authorship. Dr. Patrick Leddin is one of the top voices today on leadership, disruption, and personal transformation. Patrick is the co-author alongside literary legend James Patterson of the new business book, Disrupt Everything and Win. Take control of your future. There we go. Is this the camera over there? There we go. The book introduces 27 positive disruptor moves designed to help anyone harness change, break through uncertainty, and convert disruption into a strategic advantage. It's a rare collaboration between one of the world's most prolific storytellers and one of the most respected leadership thinkers of our time. Before entering the business world, Patrick served as an Army Ranger and infantry officer in the famed 82nd Airborne Division. He later became a senior consultant with KPMG and a partner at Franklin Covey. He has founded and built 2 successful companies, hosts the top-ranked Leadership Lab podcast, and is the best-selling author of the 5-Week Leadership Challenge. At Vanderbilt University, he served as director of the program in business studies and led the Disruption Project, a multi-year study of thriving in a world defined by change. Patrick's work has shaped leaders across industries, and his message is more relevant now than ever. Disruption is not the enemy, but one of the greatest opportunities of our lifetime. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Matthews Mentality Podcast. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
That's a mouthful.
I know, it's a whole lot. I was listening to that. I'm like, who is this guy?
Yeah, he's done a lot.
I don't know. I just keep living on the planet.
Well, you're doing okay. I'm going to dive in. So most people resist change because they crave comfort. That's part of your, is it thesis, I guess? Yeah. Why, and I ask myself this question all the time, why do humans, why do we crave comfort so much?
Well, it's an interesting question because although we do crave comfort, we actually change a lot. We are constantly changing. One thing we don't typically like, though, is change to be kind of thrust upon us. So we'll think of things that we think, oh, this is a good idea. We should try this in the office, or maybe I should try this new path on my way to work today, or whatever it might be. But if you come along and the boss is having you do it, or the construction worker stopping you in traffic flow, we don't typically like that. But in general, yeah, we kind of avoid change. We'll look for ways to not have it happen to us. Sometimes we fear it. Sometimes we feel like we're losing power. There's lots of different reasons. But ultimately, although we can handle change, a lot of times we don't choose to embrace it.
And one of the core premises of the book is that part of why comfort is so dangerous, it kind of leads to a personal stagnation. Is this?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It lulls us into this false sense of security because you like things the way they are. You want them to stay that way, and they're just not going to. I mean, we're organic material. We're growing, we're shrinking, we're dying, we're doing all sorts of things, and so are the people around us and the institutions and relationships as well. They need to be nurtured. So if we think that we can keep things just the way they are, that's deceptive. We call it a deceptive little devil, and which is great in some ways because if you don't like things the way they are right now, hang in there. They'll get better. If you're going through a rough patch and you're listening to this and you're like, gosh, I don't know if I can get up tomorrow and face the next day, I'd say hang in there. Those things will change too. But conversely, if you're enjoying the moment, embrace it, but recognize it's not going to be there forever.
And one of the things the book touches on, and we were talking offline about it before we came in this room to start recording, was what I call the victim mentality, but like victim mentality of disruption, like when disruption is forced upon you, when change is forced upon you, not when you choose it. my default state is like, why me? Why is this happening to me? And, and so again, one of the things you guys touched on is kind of don't be a victim of disruption, be a positive disruptor. So talk to the audience about the differences between
Yeah,
the
so
two.
there's different ways that people deal with it. You mentioned the victim mentality, like, why is this happening to me? Other people would be more of a martyr mentality, saying, oh, it always happens to me. Let's just get this over with and I'll take the hit right now. Some people are anxious about it, even if they know it's in their best interests. Some people don't like to give up the power. You and I were talking about all the changes in technology. And I remember a long time ago, before PowerPoint became popular, there was this thing called Harvard Graphics. It was trash. I mean, quite frankly, by today's standards, if you wanted to make a box, you had to figure out how to draw like 4 perfect lines without a mouse, using arrow keys. But I was really good at Harvard Graphics, and people would come to me if they needed a box drawn or a triangle made or something on screen. I was your man. Not so much the circle. That was totally different. But a box or a triangle, I was your guy. And then PowerPoint came out. I couldn't say enough bad about PowerPoint. This isn't going to stick. This won't work, et cetera, et cetera. So the point being is sometimes we feel like we're giving up power. But the reality is when it comes to change, a lot of times we swing from the emotional state of feeling like I'm anxious about this, I'm fearful of it, or the other side, which is I'm just going to wait this one out or I'll ignore it. And the most successful people at some point realize, I can't have the pendulum swing either way. I've got to actually confront this thing and figure out what I can do with it.
Is it, I mean, you probably spent a lot more time studying humans than I. Does people's, on average, their default state as it relates to change, this kind of victim mentality or not wanting to make a change, does that have something to do with us being, I think, natural calorie savers? Like we don't want to expend energy on something unless we have to. And if things are working for us and then there's a change, it's like, why do we have to do this?
It's interesting you ask that because one thing we get pushed back on sometimes when people read through the book and talk to us about it, not push back in a bad way, just kind of conversationally, is we talk about how we're wired to disrupt. It's one of the things we talk about. And specifically, we talk about our brains. Our brains are big compared to other, animals on planet Earth. We have this prefrontal cortex, can think up amazing things and then begin to make it happen. But then neuroscientists would also say, yeah, as much as we can do that, we also have the desire to conserve energy in our brains. And that is very much a survival type of thing. The brain expends a lot of our energy. And if we don't have to think about things, if things run in a consistent way, that saves us a ton of energy. And I would imagine that goes all the way back and transcends throughout human history, trying to conserve energy. So we have this a bit of a paradox. At one point, we like to hold on to energy and conserve energy, and our brains like the default position of consistency because it's easy. And a lot of times in our lives, we'll go through autopilot. If you're listening to this right now and you say, gosh, I don't remember if that last light I drove through was red, yellow, or green, it's because you're on autopilot. You're just moving along, and that can be totally fine. But on the other hand, we have this amazing capacity to dream up new things and to create things that didn't exist before. We're walking around your office, and this didn't exist before. It was created by yourself and other human beings who have big brains doing cool things. So there is this interesting paradox. I think what we have to do is be aware of it and then be willing to make a conscious decision about what we want to do in the face of disruption, which, by the way, doesn't mean we always go toward change. Sometimes it might be in the face of disruption, we actually go toward stability. But it's a choice as opposed to just a default move.
Yeah, and I think for most of our time on this planet, we lived in kind of a calorie deficient environment where calories were hard to come by. You had to go hunt, track down, kill. And nowadays, calories by definition, like energy for humans is abundant, unfortunately too abundant. It's trying to burn calories at this point. But I call it like the reptilian brain, which tells you like, don't do anything unless you have to, right? And it's hard to manufacture that. No, I gotta go. I gotta.
Well, that reptilian brain is what kicks in those moments when the change comes, the diagnosis from the doctor or the conversation with your partner or spouse or the memorandum from the boss type of thing. Your first thing that kicks in is that reptilian part of your brain before you can even get to your higher level thinking is, can I survive this? Do I need to flee from it? Should I freeze? What should I do? That's kicking in first, and we have to move past that to make a good decision.
Now, how did you and maybe there was a specific moment in your life where major disruption kind of blindsided you and you just said, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to do nothing and be stagnant. I'm going to actually be a positive disruptor. I'm going to leverage this disruption and in many ways get ahead of it. Like, how did you fall into or develop this concept that eventually led to, we'll talk about how it became a book, But was there a moment in your life where you kind of changed your mentality,
Yeah, I don't know if there
changed?
was a moment like a light switch for
Yeah.
me. I kind of wish there was like that origin story where I could tell you, oh, this one moment here, somebody knocked me in the snowbank and I got up and I said, never again. That's not what happened. It was probably more of a dimmer switch or a light that got flickered on and off a few times. If you were to listen to my conversation, my wife and I were walking this morning, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this guy has an absolute victim mentality this morning. So, I'm not superhuman. I have my moments where I feel very much like a victim. I have the martyr moment sometimes too. I'm the youngest of 5 kids from a Catholic household. I mean, being the martyr comes real easy to me. So I have to kind of process my way through it all. I think what I've just come to realize is that at the end of the day, use whatever analogy you want to use, but using a baseball analogy, I'd rather have the bat in my hand than let somebody else have it in their hand, at least as far as like making the choices that I'm going to make in my life. Doesn't mean I can control everything because I can't control most anything. But the things I can control and influence, I really want to kind of have my arms wrapped around them.
Well, speaking of a moment, though, James Patterson, he walks into your Vanderbilt classroom. What was the moment that day when you realized, at least for you, this wasn't going to be just another guest lecture, that this may actually lead to something bigger?
So that class that he came to is a class called Leading Business Through Times of Crisis. And it actually came out of a disruption called COVID. I imagine most people listening have heard of COVID.
Heard of it.
And so COVID hits, and I'm teaching at Vanderbilt University, and they sent out a memo that said, we are looking for people who would teach a class to 100 students online. And those who may or may not be familiar with Vanderbilt, we weren't teaching anything online, really, and certainly not classes of 100 students, except for a few kind of required undergraduate courses. So I thought, okay, this is an opportunity. So in that moment, did I have a moment of victimhood? Like, why do we have to deal with COVID? Or, hey, I wish this would go away. Sure, I'm sure I was processing all those things like everybody else. But I also saw that one particular situation as an opportunity. So I wrote a proposal and submitted it saying I want to teach a class called Leading Business Through Times of Crisis. And it got approved. So I started teaching the course. When we came out of COVID or back to whatever the new normal was, one particular section of that class became designated guest speaker only. And that was a top-down situation from the university's chancellor because somebody on their board of trust, a gentleman named Michael Ainsley, who had at one point been on the board for Lehman Brothers when it collapsed, knew a lot about dealing with adversity. He asked the chancellor if he could do a class on managing adversity. And it just so happened because I was leading through crisis, managing adversity, the class came to me. So Michael and I partnered for a few years and we were teaching classes and we had these different sections where we'd have guest speakers come in. So imagine this, we're sitting in class, 25 students in the room. In walks Doug Parker, the CEO of American Airlines, and Sarah Nelson, the president of the Flight Attendants Association. And the two of them sit down, labor and management, and talk about how they dealt with COVID together and brought the students inside that story. And it was one executive after another after another. Well, one person who comes into class is James Patterson. And people listening to this probably have varying degrees of knowledge of who James Patterson is. I had known a fair amount because I'd been at a bookstore and I've seen his name and his pretty well-known name. I didn't know how much he had accomplished in his career until I started digging into it more. But Patterson walks in, the first thing he says to the students, he goes, "Hi, I'm Stephen King," which is a great opening line. I come to find out later, James Patterson has sold more books than Stephen King and John Grisham combined, about 475 million copies. He has over 100 New York Times bestsellers. He has the Guinness Book of World Records for, I think, around 74 right now. New York Times #1 bestsellers. I mean, it's just, the list goes on and on. Written with multiple authors, co-authors, obviously his Amazon series and movies, et cetera, et cetera. So he starts telling the students his own career story. But he starts with a question. He says to them, "Are you living a good life?" was his opening question. And he kind of let the question settle for a moment. He said, "Or do you feel like you're on one treadmill, getting on another treadmill? You'll get on another treadmill and then another treadmill and then maybe one more treadmill, one after the other after the other." He said, "I really hope you're living a good life. Let me tell you how I went about living my good life." And he tells the story back to when he was at Vanderbilt. He got his master's degree in English literature there. And then he moved to New York City to get into advertising. He had no way of getting into advertising. So he's in this hotel for an extended period of time. And he'd go in every day or went in the first week with his list or his portfolio full of ads that he made up. He gave it to them. And the next week he came back with another whole portfolio. And the third week, another whole portfolio. Unbeknownst to him, he was basically disrupting how they hired people because people didn't usually come back with more than one. He just kept coming. And then they hired him. He became the youngest creative director at J. Walter Thompson Ad Agency. He became the youngest CEO at J. Walter Thompson Ad Agency. He was in his 30s, the CEO of a very large company. He wrote taglines like, "I'm a Toys R Us kid." That was a James Patterson line. And then one day he's on the Jersey Turnpike going into the office on a Sunday. He's like, "I don't want to go in the office on a Sunday. I want to hang out with my family and my friends." But he had to go in for a meeting. you probably have never had these moments where you don't want to work, but he had these moments. And he said he's sitting in the traffic, and the traffic is bumper to bumper. And in the other lane, cars are just going by, whoosh, 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 one after the other. And he's like, I'm in the wrong lane. So he quits a 7-figure salary in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, I think it's a lot of money now. It was really a lot of money back then. And decides to go all in on writing. And then writes multiple genres, multiple authors, et cetera, et cetera. So when that was all over with, and incidentally, he called it The Power of Disruption in his presentation. When it was all over with, I'm like, I want to write a book with this guy. And that's kind of what started me down the path. And if you're listening right now and you have this idea of a pitch you want to make to somebody, do not follow my lead.
What was your lead?
It was like this. I wrote him a note and I'm like, hey, I like you. You like me. Let's write a book together. Crickets. Right? No response at all. And then I waited several days and I wrote him another note and made an argument. Because years earlier, when I was working with Franklin Covey, I had a chance to work around Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And getting to watch him and interact with him and just see how successful he was with that one book, I made an argument to Jim. I said, I think we could do something like this. We could create something like this. So we got a conversation going from there. And then it was kind of the process of writing a book together.
And so you had written books previous.
Yeah.
How did this process differ than previous ones?
Every other book I've written before, except for one book. I wrote one book about building a winning culture in government organizations, which is an interesting topic. I wrote that with a guy named Sean Moon. But other than that, every other book I'd written been by myself. And this was interesting because, first of all, Patterson is really into outlines. And I am too. I've come to really appreciate them. But I remember when I was first studying like how his writing process, because there's a masterclass on how he writes. So you can watch that if you're going to partner with him. It's smart to kind of watch that and say, okay, what does he do? He talked about when he wrote one of his early books, he wrote a 300-page outline. And he's like, basically like, gosh, I've got the book now. So I thought, this guy likes long outlines. So the first outline I sent him was 37 pages long, which is for me a really long outline. And he called me up and basically told me, you know, he didn't like any of the ideas in it and it wasn't going to work this way. And this, I gave him a bunch of feedback and he said, give me something new in 2 weeks to 2 months. So for the next hour after that conversation ended, it ended with him saying, sorry, I got to go. I got to call Bill Clinton. So I was like clicking. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I'm looking at my shoes for a while, like, okay, what's the next game plan outline? So the next 2 weeks, I did nothing but think about that outline and work on a new outline. And 2 weeks later, I sent him another outline and it was basically the same thing. This one was shorter, but it didn't do well either. He didn't like this one either. And I felt at that point, I'm like, okay, I got strike 2. You got 2 outlines that aren't going that well. So then I regathered my my thoughts for a while, and I went to the chancellor at Vanderbilt University, Chancellor Dearmeyer, and I set up an appointment to go see him. And just to put that in context, as a professor or the program lead of a department, you don't really go out of your way to go see the chancellor. I mean, it's Chancellor Dearmeyer. If you're listening, you're a nice guy, but most of us don't we kind of go the other direction. If you see the chancellors, not necessarily a lot of great things are going to come out of that.
Yeah.
And so I made an appointment to go see him. Oh, by the way, there's a great line I heard from the last chancellor of Vanderbilt. He said that being the chancellor of a university is like working in a cemetery. A lot of people are below you and no one listens. I think it's a great line. So anyway, I go to see the chancellor and I walk in the door and I'd done a little back of the envelope math on this idea for how I could put this book together with Patterson. And I figured it would be worth the chancellor's interest because he's an alum from the university. If he and I did a book, that'd be really interesting. So I went into the chancellor's office and I said, Chancellor Dearmeyer, I have a 15% chance of writing a book. It'll work. If you give me what I'm asking for, it'll immediately go to 50%. And if I do what I promise you I'm going to do, it's going to go up 2 to 3% every month until we sell this book. That was my pitch. And he said, what do you need? I said, I need a research team and some funds for travel. He said, okay, you got it. So I walked out the door with 50%. And if you take that 2 to 3% and average it out, obviously that's 2.5%, run that out for the life of the project, exactly when it hit 100% is when the book sold.
There you go.
That exact month. So there you go.
Earlier you talked about, crisis, adversity, leadership, how those kind of come together. And I think an arena, but definitely a facet of your life that's where that is very true is your military experience, right? So you're Army Ranger?
Yeah.
Talk to the audience. What made you decide to do that? What compelled you to enlist? And what lessons did you learn in your time with the Rangers that in many ways, not only did you apply to your work experience, but ultimately into the book?
So I initially enlisted, I was 17 and I was coming out of high school. I lived on the south side of Chicago. So if anybody knows that area, 138th and South State Street. And the area I came out of was starting to be kind of first generation. We're going to college, but my friends' parents didn't go to college. Many of my friends didn't go to college. The path to college wasn't quite as clear. So I joined the National Guard as a way to go to college. And the funny thing is, this weekend I was in Chicago. We were downtown, and I walked by my old National Guard unit, which has been completely torn down. It's replaced with the Museum of Contemporary Art.
Wow.
It's right there by the lake, prime real estate.
Yeah.
So it's been a few years. But so I joined the National Guard, and they sent me to military police school. So I went to that initially, and I did fine with training, basic training in military police school. I came back, I started going to college, and then when I was in college, I joined ROTC and, went to airborne school one summer, just kinda did the normal ROTC thing, and I was just pretty good at it, to be honest with you.
Jumping out of planes.
Well, not even yeah, that part, yeah, for sure, but even before that, if they said, like, "Turn right," I'd turn right. They told me to turn left, I'd turn left. Tell me to shut up, I'd shut up. I was pretty good at, like, following those orders.
Sure.
And then the jumping out of planes thing, and then when I graduated, I went to infantry school, which is the school you go to, when you're as an officer, you're going to infantry school. So I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and went through that school, and while I was in the school one day, they came out and they said, "We're short lieutenants at Fort Bragg and Fort Drum." So Fort Bragg's where the airborne unit 82nd Airborne's at, and Fort Drum's where the 10th Mountain is at. My brother-in-law had been stationed at Fort Drum. That's really cold in upstate New York. I didn't wanna go
So
back
you
to the
knew
cold.
better.
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
like, I'd rather jump out of planes again than go freeze. So I signed up for the 82nd, and then it's just kind of a natural default thing after you come out of infantry school as an officer, they're gonna at least send you to Ranger school and see if you can make it. And I was very fortunate, whatever you wanna call it. When I went to school was 68 days long. I made it in 68 days. So that's, a couple hours sleep a night, 1 meal a day for 68 days type of thing, and walk around the woods a lot. Um, some people don't make it. Some people stay there for up to a year before they make it. It's kinda crazy. You lose a ton of weight. I mean, I came out probably 135 pounds.
Speaking of calories, you run
Yeah.
a calorie
Yeah, I was
deficit.
in calorie deficit for sure. And, so then I graduated Ranger school, and then I didn't go to a Ranger battalion. At that point, you go to, I went to the 82nd Airborne Division, and I spent almost 7 years there before I got out. So, yeah, it was just kind of like one day you don't wake up and say, "I wanna go to Ranger school." It's like you just kinda work your way toward it.
You
Next thing
just
you know,
kinda
I'm
end
ready
up
to
there.
go. Yeah.
And what are some of the things, I mean, certainly the physical, exertion probably isn't gonna be replicated in a working environment, but the mental toughness needed to push through that. Like, what lessons did you learn being a ranger that you've been able to, whatever moments, in terms of building your companies or, again, writing books where you're like, "Okay, if I could go through that, I could get through
Yeah, I
this,"
think
you know?
there's a little bit of that, right? If and it's not just, my that's just my story, but everybody's had something that's been tough they've gone through and got knocked down and got back up. That's how we build resilience, and it's
Mhm.
sometimes it's going through those moments you realize what you're capable of doing, and when you hit another one, whether you want it or not, whether you sign up for Ranger School or you go to the doctor's office and something hits you sideways with the medical report, whatever it might be, the fact that you can figure out how to work your way through that is oftentimes what you look back on and go, "Okay, I made it through that. I can make it through this." So I would say that some things that helped kind of specifically from Ranger School, one would be the ability to kind of lean on people around you. There was a time I remember we did a couple different obstacle courses, and there's one obstacle you have to do where it's like a kinda like a big table stacked on a big table, stacked on a big table,
Mhm.
kinda goes up like 30, 40 feet, and every table length gets further apart. So the first one, you can kinda reach up easy and pull yourself up. The second one is a little bit harder to get up to the next level, and they're all stacked on top of each other. So every time you go around to pull up to the next table level, you're exposed because you're hanging from that table. I remember as we were working our way up, obviously, it's all about teamwork because the first couple you could do on your own, but then you get to levels 3, 4, 5, you're getting 20, 30 feet off the ground. You can't reach it without somebody boosting you, especially me, but, most people. And, I remember getting toward the top, and I was trying to do something, I slipped, and I almost fell, like, I would have fallen, and somebody from behind grabbed me and pulled me back onto that platform. If I'd fallen, it would not have been good, probably 35, 40 feet up. I have no idea who that person was. Right? So that's part of being on a team is, sometimes when you do something or your weaknesses show, somebody else comes along and helps you out, and their strengths can save you. And that's exactly what happened there. So that's one thing I learned there for sure. Another thing is that one thing that's tough about Ranger School for people is it's physically tough, it's mentally tough, but it's also a leadership course. So you can't there's 4 phases. When I went to Ranger School, there were 4 phases. So there was the Fort Benning phase, which is like North American terrain. There is the Fort Bliss phase, which is desert terrain. There's the Dahlonega, Georgia phase, which was the mountain terrain. And then there's the swamps of Eglin, Florida, which is I guess the swamp terrain, we'll call it that. And each phase, you have a leadership role, and you have to do a good enough job in a leadership role to be assessed by the evaluators, and they say, yeah, you can move on to the next one. So that's certainly a situation you run into. So each time you have a leadership challenge, like you might be the platoon leader for the day type of thing, did you do well enough in that job to get to move along? So I think I learned a lot about myself in regard to like what I could handle and how I could work with people and recognizing that it's not about you as a leader. It's about the objective we're trying to do and working together as a team.
You certainly spent a lot of time studying leadership and leaders in general. What are some common traits, themes, characteristics that every leader you looked at, like, oh, this is mandatory to be an effective leader? Like, what are some of the things that to anyone listening in all walks of life, whether leading a ranger team, a sports team, a business team, whether it's a CEO leading a company of 10,000 people all the way down to a team manager who has three people underneath him or her, what are just some common characteristics or attributes that every effective
I
leader
think
seems to have?
I think, to be a great leader, there's a few things you have to look at. One is results. If you can't deliver results, it's hard to make a claim that you're a great leader. So regardless of whatever job you're doing, in your business or organization, are you delivering on your projects? Are you delivering on the metrics that matter? Are you delivering results? Not just once, not heroically one time, but time after time, quarter after quarter, kind of sustained results. The second thing is it gets into the behaviors because the results we achieve come from the behaviors we take on. You don't improve fitness wise if you don't get up and go to the gym type of thing or change your diet. So our behaviors drive our results. So looking at their behaviors, they're kind of all over the map in some regard. Some people are more charismatic naturally than other people are,
Mhm.
but charisma alone doesn't make it happen. Modeling behavior, creating a vision, coaching other people, caring enough about people to set high expectations for them and for yourself. These are all behaviors that truly matter. And then when you dig past behaviors, you get into mindsets, which is how do they see things? Because how we see things often determines what we do, and what we do determines what we get. So their mindset, did they see the world as full of opportunities or full of problems? Do they see everything as every person has potential within them? And my job as a leader is to help bring that out. In fact, Stephen Covey, I liked how he defined leadership. He said that a leader is a person who sees the worth and potential in someone and speaks it to them so clearly that they start to see it in themselves. And that's a great definition of leadership. And then I guess the fourth thing is their character. So results matter, behaviors matter, mindset certainly matters, but who you are really matters. And when you think about character, now you're talking about, do people have confidence in you? Can they trust you? Do you have both the competence and the character to deliver results? So that gets into areas like integrity and loyalty and a commitment to doing the right thing. Those are really critical things as well.
So you mentioned four things that make an effective leader. There was four things. There's a four-step cycle your book references. I think it was discern, behave, achieve, refine.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
You pass.
there you go.
A plus.
Hey, you know, I can write down notes every now and then, but walk the audience through how does that play into adapting to disruption, adapting to change, and putting people in a position to win whatever it is? Like, break down each one of those and how it relates.
It really starts pre-cycle by getting clear on, like, why are you here? What are you trying to do? We call it the fire inside in the book, but it's kind of what's your purpose? What's your passion? What's your why? And then we go beyond that to say, okay, if you're clear on your why, like why I'm on this team or why I'm on a planet Earth or why I built this organization, whatever it might be, then you can start to look at disruptions and say, well, every disruption that comes along could actually be an opportunity to throw some fuel on that fire. So AI comes along and you could run and hide from it, or you could say, you know what, this might be able to actually help our business over time. Um, the medical diagnosis comes from the doctor, and you can say, gosh, I didn't expect that curveball to be thrown at me in life, but maybe it's a different way that I could start spending more time with my family or doing something different. Who knows? So it opens up opportunities, or I can find out about a cause I didn't even know about. And now I'm serving on a board somewhere. You never know what can happen in life. So the first step, discern, is about the idea when disruption arrives, big, small, unique, ubiquitous, whatever it might be. We found that the most effective people don't just react to it. Reaction could be the run and hide from it, the freeze, the fight, the flee, whatever it might be. Instead of doing those things just naturally, what they do is they step back and they just think for a few moments. They discern. They say, okay, I might be excited about this opportunity. This disruption is actually a really positive thing, or it's not what I was expecting. This seems pretty negative. However they might see it, they say to themselves, okay, what role should I take on? Should I lean more into this thing and kind of chase the change, or should I pull back and double down on what I'm already doing? And they think through the process of identifying. We had 5 roles in the book, but they talk about these different roles they could take on and say, okay, I'm going to be a trailblazer with this thing, or I'm going to be a torchbearer and I'm going to lead people toward a movement. Or I'm actually going to say no to this thing and put the fire out, whatever it might be. Then the second thing is behave. Now I figure out, like, what do I want to do? The behave step says, what are your disruptive strengths? Like, what do you do really well? And in studying positive disruptors, and I didn't really say this yet, but in the 3 years of research on it, we sat down and interviewed 350 people around the world who we consider positive disruptors, people who in the face of disruption see it not as something that should be avoided, but actually it's fertile ground to do something maybe new and cool. And surveyed thousands more. We found that they had 16 different behaviors that stood out. And the interesting thing, I think, is nobody had them all like maxed out. And there was no perfect combination. If you have 1, 8, and 10, you'll be nailing it. What it tells me is there's 16 behaviors. And guess what? We all kind of got some of these things. So what are your strengths? So I want to lean into my strengths and build a team around me or have other people around me who can help offset some of my weaknesses. And we can dive into what those strengths look like a little bit later if you'd like to. And then from there, you start applying your strengths to achieve some results. And we talk about results that you can have interpersonally. You can have results in your family. You can have results in your team, your organization, your industry, society. We talk to people who changed a relationship all the way out to people who changed society and in their communities they lived in. And then the last way around refinement is all about getting better. And you look at the results you achieved and say, okay, what could I do differently? What can I learn from this? In that particular area, we interviewed 2 four-star generals, retired four-star generals, David Petraeus, he became the director of the CIA, and Stan McChrystal. Many people know Stan McChrystal's work as well. He led Special Operations Command. Asking them both, why is it that the military is so good at doing after-action reviews? After they do a training exercise or a real-world exercise, they're really good at stepping back and saying, okay, what did we learn? What went right? What went wrong? What can we do different? Kinda like a football team would do,
Yeah, watch
either
film.
quickly between plays or watching film later on for sure. And the answer they gave is we're really good at it because the stakes are high. And it makes sense in a military context because, life or limb
Yeah.
makes sense in a sports context because the season's on the line, but it makes sense in your business and your family as well to step back and say, "Okay, what can we do better? What can we learn? How can we get better? Because the stakes are high because our time is finite. We gotta make it count in ways that matter."
You disagree with me, but on that last one, kind of the refine, speaking about the military or football or anything, of going back and looking the post assessment briefs of, in my opinion, a lot of people don't do that.
No, they don't.
Yeah. Okay. So
No, they don't at all.
we agree there. And
Yeah, most
again,
people don't. The people we studied tended to.
so I'm just going to speak from my own personal experience. I'm 43. I certainly didn't do that in my 20s, like not consistently. Maybe I was like, gosh, why didn't I earn that assignment? Why didn't I get the promotion? Why didn't I win the business? Whatever. It really wasn't until later. And I don't know why. Maybe I feel like part of what drove me is like, as you get older, I hope, at least this was my experience, um, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? When you're young, a mistake feels like the end of the world. It destroys this like perfect perception you have of yourself where you're like, no, I'm great. I have it all figured out. And if I don't go back and look at why I didn't win the business, I can kind of cloak myself in the blanket of like, well, it's not my fault. The odds were stacked against. It was a setup. I never had a chance of winning it. And you get older, you're like, okay, I'm at a point now where if anything goes wrong, I'm like, okay, how did I screw this up? Like, and it's agency. I think some of that's agency. Like I'm in control, and if something didn't happen the way I want it to, I made a mistake somewhere. But why do you think so many people perhaps don't choose, or in my case, don't choose it earlier than I wish I had, this kind of concept, like, and again, maybe it's an agency concept of like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a post brief and figure out there's an outcome that didn't happen the way I want it. How can I learn and get better?
Yeah, I think there's lots of reasons, I guess, but certainly one of them is I feel like the world's doing it against me. So if the cards are stacked against me, I did the best I can.
It's
I'm
not my
moving on.
fault.
Yeah, moving on. I think that also it's time. it takes time to kind of slow down and have these conversations or spend some time reflecting on things. And sometimes we feel like we don't have the time. I have a friend in sales who she said her best day of the year is the last day of the fiscal year when she hits her number, because everybody's texting her and sending her DMs like, great job this year, blah, blah, blah. She feels like, she's 10 feet tall. And she goes, pretty much the worst day of the year is like the next day or shortly thereafter, because the new goals come out and they're higher. And you're thinking, I killed myself to get to that. How the heck am I going to get to this new level? And you just kind of go right back into operations mode. I'm not reflecting on it. So I think those are a couple of reasons. For me personally, I probably don't like to do it because who wants to get beat up? That doesn't feel great. And especially when I was younger, I'm 57. So there's part of me that's like, I started to realize everything's not black and white. There's a lot more shades of gray out there. And there's a lot of growth I can do in the gray area. I've had students at Vanderbilt over the years, they'll be like, oh, Professor Leddin, we looked at your resume, or LinkedIn profile. How do we have a career like you? Which I don't know why anybody would want that. But if they want that, I usually go out and have a cup of coffee with them and say, let me tell you the rest of the story. Yeah. Because you're seeing the highlight film right here.
LinkedIn. I don't put all the posts.
All the lessons learned happen in the white spaces when I just completely drop the ball. So I think that there is a bit of, you get beyond yourself a little bit in certain ways. I remember when I first started teaching at the university, I read an article about how to be a good professor. And it talked about how when you're a new professor, and you could probably apply this to a lot of different situations, but when you're new at something, you're standing up there and you're like, do I look stupid? Are people judging me? Am I dressed wrong? All those type of things. And then once you kind of move beyond that a little bit, you're like, do I know the content? Am I competent to be standing up there? And then if you get beyond that, then it's like, are they actually learning? And the problem with doing it that way is you're kind of in the wrong complete order. The question should just be, are they learning? So what I found is that for me personally, I've gotten much better at rushing past steps 1 and 2 and just worrying about step 3. Now that's something that comes from the military for sure, because the military is very much about the mission. Like, what's the objective here? You're going to try to do something and something's going to go wrong. And it may not turn out the way you want it to, but at the end of the day, you still have the objective. So how are you going to make that happen? And that's why sometimes people say to me, well, the military might not be great at this because they're so much about standard operating procedures and following processes. I said, yeah, but they're also really good at improvise, adapt, and overcome. And that's a lot what the book talks about too.
Yeah, and agency and victimhood. I referenced when I was younger, like I got 4 kids, and it doesn't matter what it is. Like, it's not their fault. It's always someone else's fault. And you realize like it's almost like hardwired into humans at a young age. And it's probably being driven by fear that if they say, hey, this is my fault, I messed this up, that they're going to get in worse trouble with. As a parent, you're just like, if you just accept it, you actually get in less trouble.
Yeah.
But it's trying to figure out a way to accelerate that ownership in young professionals. We have hundreds and hundreds of young professionals here. And I'm sure well, first of all, all your students, right? More often than not pretty young. But even just entry level at any company, whether it's one you founded or ran or anywhere, it's getting them to a place of just accelerating what you hope is their arrival of this mentality of ownership of like, hey, I'm in control, and if something doesn't go, it's on me to fix it, and just being coachable.
Well, when you asked that question about, what do leaders do that makes them good leaders? The first thing I should have said was self-awareness. Yeah. And I'm aware now I didn't say it, so you can beat me up on it, right? I'm self-aware. But there's something really valuable, and it comes out it's some part along the path in life. I wish I'd learned it sooner, but that self-awareness that I don't know everything, and I'm never going to learn everything, and that's okay because I've got a team of people. And by the way, if I stand in front of my team and I say, hey, I'm not exactly sure how we're going to do this, something just changed and we've got to figure this thing out, and I'm not sure I know how to do it, what tends to happen is they actually root for you to do it. Yeah. They actually step up. They don't sit there and go, okay, boss, we're going to watch you fail. Yeah. They're actually like, all right, let's help you figure this thing out. I mean, I guess the only time they might say, boss, we're going to watch you fail is when you've historically been a really difficult person to work with, right? But for the most part, that's not what typically happens.
That's when there's a breakdown in trust, built up resentment, all of those bad things. Let me ask you, the why, right? The motivation. And what is your why today? Like, what drives you to write a book, right? And talk to us about how that's might have evolved or changed over time.
I don't know how long I thought about the why question. I mean, I think I had some things in me that wanted to start businesses and kind of figure certain things out, maybe lead people or stretch myself a bit. But it really was about 15 years or so ago. My wife and I had started a consulting practice. We ran it for 12 years. It was interesting from my perspective because we did pretty well. We had 4 offices in different states and we were doing really well. And then I was out of the country for 3 months on a client project. And while I was out of the country, or while I was gone, everything was still running back at our offices. We had good people. They were doing great things. Our clients were happy, et cetera. I came back in the States during the holidays, and a former boss of mine from KPMG and I were talking on the phone, and he said, "You've been gone for 3 months doing other project work?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Your employees haven't quit?" I said, "No, they haven't quit." And he said, "So your clients are still there?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You want to talk to my boss?" I said, "Why?" He said, "We're looking to acquire somebody." So I wasn't looking to sell it, but they made us a good offer. So we sold the business. So at 42, I exited the business and I really started thinking about like, okay, what do I want to do next? And that's how I ended up at the university because along the way, I'd picked up my PhD at Kentucky. Like I drove by and got it, but I went to school at Kentucky and picked up my PhD. And then I said, I'm actually going to use this thing and go down to the university, start teaching. But I was really thinking about like, what's my why? What am I here for? What am I trying to do? And as I thought about it for a while and did some work on it, and it wasn't an overnight thing for me. For me, it was many weeks of just kind of really thinking about this at a deeper level. I decided that my why in life was to provide ideas and insights to help other people live their great purpose. So when this project came along, I'm like, this makes sense. Mm-hmm. If James Patterson came to me and said, let's write a thriller together, maybe that would not have aligned with my purpose. But this particular book about how to help people deal with disruptions in their life and turn them into something positive and give them tons of stories from people who've walked the life and experienced it, that's a no-brainer. So for me, my why is to help other people live their great purpose. And if that means I've got to write a book with Patterson, so be it.
What do you think, and I think I know the answer, but what do you think is the big disruption for most people either here or coming their way?
Oh boy, I think right now I'm not a futurist, so I can't tell you like exactly what AI is going to do.
On the show before.
Yeah, I'm not one. I'm a human behavioralist. What I can tell you is it's going to come. I think it can be pretty tech-driven. Economy might make a pretty big change. I think a lot of people are going to be trying to figure out like what their career is going to do next. I think that shift is happening, and we're already seeing it with some jobs numbers. But I can't tell you what it's going to be. I just can tell you it's going to come. And I think the biggest shift is probably what needs to happen between our 2 ears as we think about, okay, how are we going to take charge and put ourselves in our driver's seat of our own lives?
And I'm bundling into the AI acronym relating to AI. What would your practical advice be to someone listening? Just like, okay, change is coming. It's a technological change. Again, there's a lot to this. I think as much as AI is robotics, and I think robotics happens with AI, but like, what should they be doing to win? How do they harness this disruption? What are some actionable things, perhaps that even you're doing? Yeah,
so I'll give you one example that happened to me not that long ago. I was talking to this guy. He came out, he and I were chatting, and he said that he does a lot of writing for his company. Like, so writes a lot of copy for their advertisements, but also or their ads or even social media postings, things like that. But he also writes speeches for the CEO to give. And he said to me, I don't know what to do about AI. I'm going to lose my job. My CEO just gave a speech that literally ChatGPT wrote. I'm going to lose my job. And I said, okay, can you imagine a world where AI exists and you're more valuable, not less valuable to your company? And he thought about it for a moment. He said, yeah, I think I could. I said, okay, of these 5 roles we talk about in the book, which one do you think you should take on right now?
What were the 5 roles again?
Okay, the 5 roles. Yeah, so it's a typical 2x2 block, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm an academic, we do 2x2 blocks. So imagine that there's one axis that's going toward change and one that's going toward stability. And one axis is going toward being an individual, and one's going collective. And the one block that's individual and change is I'm going to be a trailblazer. I'm going to move out, embrace this change, start the new company, launch the new project, whatever it might be. The other role that's going toward change, but collectively is a torchbearer. I'm going to create a movement. So I'm not going to do it all on my own, but I'm going to create a movement. People are going to follow me and I'm going to light the path and we're going to start doing something really cool in our business or really cool in our industry. When you go towards stability, there's 2 roles down there. The individual role is I'm a fire chief. I'm a firefighter. I'm going to put that fire out. So you go to a conference and you hear about this new piece of technology that's going to change. It's a new version of a CRM, and you're like, I want this thing. And then you go back and you start thinking, you go, you know what? We already have 3 CRM implementations in the last 5 years. If I do this, my people are going to rebel. I'm going to be a firefighter and just put this out right now. I'm going to double down on what we've already done. A fire chief might say, you know what? We could continue to go down this path like everybody else is doing in the industry. Everybody's responding the same way. But if we do that, we eventually lose the identity about what makes our company cool. So what we're going to do is I'm going to actually create a movement to say no towards some things. So an example of that might be you have a retail store and you watch everybody else in the retail space going more and more online as people started going online. And then with COVID, they started bringing it to the curb, and then they put shelving up inside their space, their normal retail space for people to come in and just pick the stuff up. And at some point you might go, I'm not going to keep putting up shelving in my retail space. I'm going to actually focus on the experience of coming to our store. So I say no to that. And then the fifth role is kind of right in the middle. It's a Tinder gatherer. You got to get some more information before you make a decision about which way you're going to go. So those are the 5 roles. And I asked the guy, which one could you take on, the AI guy? And he said, I think I could take on the role of trailblazer. Not everybody knows that, not that many people know that much about AI. I don't know that much about AI. I'm going to spend some time studying it. You and I were talking about earlier about, spending some time investing, understanding the technology and kind of the thinking behind it. That's what he said he could do. And he could lean into these particular strengths. And then what impact could he have? Well, I could achieve these results. And then I might actually take a different role on. Maybe then I go from being a trailblazer to a torchbearer and I start teaching the company what they could do with AI. So the point being is it went from AI is going to get me and crush me and I better work on my resume to maybe I can do something about this. And in the face of it, here's some things that I could try to do. Does it guarantee his success? Absolutely not. But was the other way going to guarantee success? Yeah, he was going to succeed at probably eventually losing his job.
I was going to say the other way guarantees irrelevancy, failure, however you want to describe it. Yeah, as AI started to kind of come in over the last couple of years, again, speaking from my own experience, there was I'm going to dismiss it, maybe because early on it was hallucinated a lot, but then it was just like, when am I going to have the time to educate myself on this? I have the normal day job of running a company and battling competitors and trying to win market share, whatever it is, and you have your personal life. But when it comes to something this disruptive, right, to the book's point, it's like it's happening. You're either going to need to figure it out or it's going to figure you out.
Yeah, and I would say every industry to varying degrees needs to be disrupted right now. When Patterson and I are talking to media, we were on Varney and Company the other day at Fox, and he's like, well, cable news doesn't need to be disrupted type of thing. And I'm like, oh, come on. Well, it's constantly being disrupted.
I think it's been disrupted.
He's like, well,
right?
The internet. I said, yeah. And then the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, it's going to keep coming.
Yeah.
So if you're going to stay in the game, you got to recognize it's going to keep coming. And I think one thing that happens is sometimes, and it's one of the behaviors in the book we talk about of the 16 behaviors. One of it is that some people are really good at saying, I'm going to let go of good to get something better. And some of us aren't good at that. Some of us will hold on to good until good becomes awful, but we still hang on to it. And it's like sand falling through our grasp, and we'll know it. People know it when they're listening to this, when they just think about relationships they have. They have a relationship that maybe at one time was good. It could be with a boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever it might be with. And then it started to not be so good. And you weren't willing to let it go, even when you knew it should have been let go, because at least you knew what it was. Right? If I let go of that relationship, maybe there's not a better one out there. And that's that mentality you have. Sometimes you feel like you're going to hang on to something. And when you hang on to it, you just lose your grip on it. So some people will say, you know what? Our business is doing really well. I'll tackle it next quarter. I'll tackle it next quarter. I'll tackle it next quarter. And maybe those are the right decisions. I just want them to do it not out of autopilot. I want them to step back and decide when they're going to get in the game.
Part of harnessing disruption and winning, from my vantage point, is you got to make tough decisions, whether it's letting go of a relationship that at one point was very important to you, whatever, but making really tough decisions that not just affect you, but probably will affect people around you. Like looking back, what is maybe a decision or two you had to make in a leadership role that looking back, yeah, it was the right decision, but in the moment, certainly there was uncertainty. There was uncertainty, but also it was really difficult.
Yeah, I can think of a few of them. So little in scale, the grand scheme of things. I remember one time in the military, somebody came, they came to the formation and they had a tongue ring in their mouth. And granted, maybe not that big a deal in a lot of places, but in the military, it's kind of a big deal. Especially then, like you can't have a tongue ring, take your tongue ring out. And I sent him.
Without even getting into why would you have a tongue ring?
Yeah, that's a whole nother story for another day. But he had a tongue ring. And he wouldn't take it out. So I had the NCO take him down to the dentist, told the dentist to take it out. The dentist sends him back up and says, basically came back up with a message saying, if you want it taken out, Captain, you take it out. I said, all right, I'm not doing that. Send him to a mental health facility for an evaluation. So I said, long story short, in that particular situation, I exited him from the military. And that's a tough decision to some degree to exit anybody. This one was an easy one because I remember when he came back from the mental health facility, I said, well, what did he say? He said, well, while he was talking to you, he wanted to punch you in the face. I'm like, okay, that's a pretty easy decision. This guy needs to go. But there's a lot of decisions you make that are not easy decisions. Whether you're, we're going to cut back on this particular product, we're going to close this office, we're going to make this decision that's going to impact real people. And I think that anybody with a heart that cares about other people recognize that a lot of times as a leader, you're going to be the focal point of dinner conversation in people's homes. And how are you affecting them? Is it in a positive way or not so much of a positive way? But I think that those are the tough decisions that you said as a CEO or a leader you have to make. That's the reality. You're not paid to make the easy decisions like get this guy out of the Army. You're paid to make the tough decisions like we're going to close this office. And that's the challenge. But if you don't do it, strategy is all about choosing a lane, not trying to straddle and be everything to everybody. If you try to be everything to everybody, you won't do it well.
What do you think keeps people from making tough decisions? Is it kind of what you touched on, being the conversation at dinner of like just worrying that other people are going to talk negatively about them?
I mean, it could be that to some degree, especially if they're able to recognize that these are real people. I mean, we see sometimes cuts in organizations, especially large organizations, where I would suggest that some of the people who are making cuts have never been fired themselves or gone through that round of layoffs or seen it at their own family table because they don't necessarily recognize the impact it's going to have. But who am I to say what's going on in somebody else's mind that way? But I would say, yeah, I mean, to some degree, it's tough. You think, well, things will get a little bit better if we hold off on making this decision. But my experience has told me, especially like interpersonal conflicts or things like that, ignoring them does not make them get better. You have to address them, and hopefully, you've gone down a path to try to address the, exiting somebody from the organization or laying people off. But I think another thing that makes it difficult sometimes to make those decisions is some of us have really pretty good instincts, and some people don't. And when there's a lot of people relying on you, and you have hubris around your ability to have good instincts, that can come at a cost for a lot of people. So one thing we recommend people do, and we talk about it in the book, is really think about the decisions you've made in the past and think through the idea, do you feel like your instincts are good, but are they really good? And if you can't always trust your instincts, who do you have around you who can help you think this thing through? I was talking to this group in the Bahamas a couple of years ago, and I asked them, how many of you feel like people have good instincts, like a gut worth trusting? And I was surprised, 80% of the people put their hands up in the air. I said, seriously? There was a big casino outside our room. I'm like, just go out to that casino at 10 a.m. or 1 a.m. and tell me if people have good instincts.
Was it the Baha Mar?
Yeah, it was. Exactly, yeah.
Been to that casino.
Yeah. Had good instincts?
No, yeah, my instincts was I don't gamble. So
See,
I had great instincts.
Good instincts, yeah, exactly.
There's a reason casinos exist.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're in the Bahamas. What was that? They raised their hand. Instincts. What was that crypto company that was in the Bahamas that went BK? Stole all the money. Crazy guys. Yeah.
Sam Bankman-Fried.
What was the name of that?
Oh.
Yeah.
FTX,
you were giving a speech to FTX.
Yeah, I was talking to FTX.
Yeah,
we have some good advice.
We have great
I was
instincts.
like, hey, disrupt everything, y'all.
Yeah.
Get in there.
They said Patrick told us
it was not.
I know. Anyway, sorry, you said you were in the Bahamas.
But it was at that place, yeah.
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 It's a nice hotel.
It is, yeah. Got to go to the water park.
Yeah. The water park's great.
Yeah, it really is.
The Bahamas is a little more adult friendly. Water park's kids friendly.
Yeah.
Casinos.
My wife digs the flamingos.
Yeah, the flamingos
there.
cool.
They're cool.
One of the things I like to ask, so we do start, stop, keep, but keep doing. But I'll get to that. Is worst, nicest, craziest. Like, what's the worst thing in business that ever happened to you, and how did you overcome it? How do you respond?
The worst thing that ever happened to me in business. How did I respond?
Yeah, to where the audience hears, I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. How did you ever overcome that?
So I remember when we had our first business, the one that we sold after 12 years, we had a government client in DC. And
government clients are great. They just keep paying, right? Even after you die.
Exactly. And I remember we had this great guy we worked with for like 4 or 5 years on this contract. He was awesome. And then the new person came in, and we had to go in and brief him. And it was just a train wreck. I mean, we walked in the room, and just from word one, this guy obviously just hated us. I don't know why.
He was with Doge.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, chainsaw.
Yeah.
So from this out of the gate, it was kind of like I don't know if he felt like he needed to have his new people in the room or what it was going to be, but it was clear like this is not going well. And plus, by the way, I mean he was so unprofessional, put it that way. Everything was an F-bomb and yelling at everybody and all that type of stuff. And I was just like, this is just a disaster. And I'm looking at this like this is going to go the complete wrong way. The funny thing was that we kept working with him for a while, and it was like 6 months of just watching him, like going in and having meetings with him where he was just like throwing stuff and yelling and all this type of thing. And then I watched him do it to one of my employees, and I was like, all right, we're out of here. This is
Yeah.
just not going to work. And just that whole process of like losing a good client, the client moved along, kind of much of our work in that area was built off of them, and then realizing, okay, we got to completely reset. That just sucks when you lose like 30% of your revenue as a company and
Yeah, it's a tough
80% out
one.
of that one office.
How do you like? What do you do? You go home that night, and how do you kind of grab hold of this?
Have a
Like,
drink, kick the dog, all those
yeah.
things.
No, I was just saying, how do you wake up? The next day, you're like, all right, it is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
we either wallow in self pity or we get rolling.
Yeah, you got to figure out what you're going to do next. I mean, we had good people. It wasn't our people's fault. It was just a situation, the way it played out.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully you've been working on your strengths along the way, building up to that point, right? You got a lot of good reps in, and you can go pitch to some other people.
And there's a learning lesson in there, which is don't put your business in a position to have 30% of your revenue dictated by, I don't know if it was like in every 2 to 4 years, people change in the government cycle, but.
Yeah, this particular one, they were civilians, so they could stay there forever. I think that just happened. This one guy got promoted and somebody else came in. So I was like, ugh.
What's the nicest thing that ever happened to you?
Let's see, about 14 years ago this month, my mom passed away. And I've been thinking about this one for a while. Not this question from you specifically, but just this situation.
Like,
yeah, you've been in my brain for a while.
Just hit that question right.
The worst part is you've been in my brain. The best part has been about this question.
Yeah.
So about 14 years ago, my mom passed away, and I went up to Chicago for the funeral. And there you live. They've kind of kept moving further south of Chicago, so they're kind of out on the edges now. And the church they go to is really an interesting church because I don't know how this happened, but can you imagine a church that's kind of rectangular? It's a Catholic church. The priest would be up front. It's a long rectangle, kind of my aisle coming down the middle, like you would typically see in kind of a small Catholic church. At some point, they decided to expand this place, and instead of like doubling its size, they just built another wing 90 degrees out.
Yeah.
It looks identical.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting because if you're sitting on one side of the church, you can't see the other side of the church.
Yeah.
It's literally another building. Everybody can see the priest. Anyway, so it's at this church is the funeral. And when it was over with, we walked outside. It's cold in December in Chicago. And I look around, and right in front of me is one of my employees. He flew out from D.C. on his own dime to be at my mom's funeral.
Oh, that's nice.
I was like, gosh, that's when you realize, like, this is really what it's about, right? I mean, it's nice to hit the numbers and do well with the business, but when somebody comes out of their way to be at your mom's funeral, that was 14 years ago, we had already sold the business. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Just say maybe he's trying to get a good bonus.
Yeah, maybe I
already sold the business. What's the craziest thing that ever happened to you in business?
This
or
military one.
Yeah.
I wrote a book with James Patterson. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
right?
no, I just
it's a crazy ride.
I always love good because so many people it's like kind of business related, but so like crazy business stories to where the audience is like, I can't believe that happened, and a lot of them have like funny endings or good endings, but.
Oh, I remember when I was in the military, they do these special assignments you have to do where it's like, okay, this new project came along, Leddin, come in here, you're in charge of it. And that's how they kind of hand out duties like that. And I got handed the family member live fire exercise.
So family members come into town and they shoot.
Family members come out and they get to shoot all the weapons that you have and do all that stuff. Jeez. And can you imagine it's busloads of
civilians,
spouses and kids getting off the bus to come out to the family member live fire.
Gives me anxiety thinking about it.
And by the way, all the weapons we were using were not just our weapons. They had like all these Soviet weapons or Russian weapons out there and stuff. It was completely insanity. And we survived. I got throttled for not running it well by like every level of chain of command, but nobody got killed. And
success.
Yeah, success.
But what about writing a book with James Patterson? I mean, that must have been a trip, right?
That was a total trip. Yeah, it still is. I mean, he calls me like 3-4 times a week right now.
And now that the book's gone, you don't have to answer anymore, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Just do every other one. Get a voice. My phone's full of
what about the process was maybe vastly different than maybe you thought going in?
Well, I mean, first of all, everything. Nobody, I love Sean Moon, but nobody ever in a podcast interview said, "What's it like to write a book with Sean Moon?" And just like he's probably not had a lot of people saying, "What's it like to write a book with Patrick Leddin?" But with James Patterson, everybody says, "How did this happen?
Yeah.
How'd you end up with this guy? What was that like?" All that type of thing. And it was interesting because in the very beginning, when I asked him to do when I sent him that terrible email saying, "I'm friends with you or you're friends, let's write a book together," and he didn't answer. And I sent him the next one. His admin came back and she said,
"Does he remember the first email?"
No.
Yeah.
Okay. They probably screened that one out. His admin set up a meeting for me to get 15 minutes on the phone with him. And so I set up this meeting with him. It was on a Wednesday morning at like 9 a.m. And I set up the meeting with him. The week prior to that, I just happened to be out in Colorado. My son and I were driving to New Mexico to hike a mountain down there. And we're driving along and my phone rings. It's exactly 1 week earlier to the day and hour meeting. And I look at my phone, it says James Patterson.
Said,
and I show it to my son. He's like, "You better answer that." So I was like, "Hi, this is Patrick." And he's like, "Hey, Patrick, this is Jim." And I look at my son. I'm like, "Hey, Jim, how you doing?" And then he said, "I understand we have a meeting next week scheduled." And I was like, "Whew, I thought that was this week."
Yeah.
He said, "You know what? Don't worry about the meeting. Let's just do the book." I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" He said, "We're going to collaborate together." I said, "What does that mean, collaborate together?" He said, "Well, you write out an outline and send it to me. I'll give you some feedback on it." And I didn't tell you this when we were talking about it earlier. So I sent him the first outline. He came back, he hated it. I sent him this, and after the first one, he said, "This needs to feel different than any other book you've ever read on a shelf. It needs to be disruptive." So I'm like thinking about like, what does that even mean? How do you make a book that's disruptive? Should it be written like front to back in a circle? Is it a choose your own adventure type of thing? What do you do? So I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, all right, I don't know what to do. So I write this outline and I provide the entire first chapter, and I write a fictional story in the first chapter. Who am I to think that I'm going to write the world's best-selling fiction author a fictional chapter? It is the most dark, you've got no hope in life book you can ever imagine, that it should never see light of day. But I was trying to come up with something that was completely different. So I think that going through that, even to today though, he's great to hang out with and just chat a little bit. He's involved in so many different things. And to see a guy who's 78 years old.
He's still going hard.
And just, he's still so in the game because he wants to be in the game.
One of the things I like to do is kind of start, stop, keep doing. Like, what is something audience members should immediately start doing in their lives? What is something they should stop doing? And then making assumptions on average people. What is something people should keep doing?
I would say something they should start doing is say yes to something scary. So if your boss offers you an opportunity to tackle a project and you feel you're not ready, give it a shot. If your friend asks you to come to the gym and try a new workout, give it a shot. Try something one time. Start doing that. The stop doing is stop trying to tackle everything and maybe pull out your list of things to do and knock about a third of them off the list right now and just say, I'm not going to do it. See what happens. Your world probably won't blow up. And then to continue doing is keep betting on yourself. You got a big brain. You got a lot of great experiences. You got tons of resources. We talked about technology. We all have it at our fingertips. You can do some cool stuff. So bet on yourself.
How would you just one word to describe your mentality? What would it be?
Tenacious.
Yeah. You always been like that?
Yeah.
Just from the womb, nature? Or was it something you were nurtured, your parents kind of created an environment?
No, definitely not that.
No?
Like I said, I'm the youngest of 5. My dad had like 3 or 4 jobs. He was busy. So we kind of just did our thing. But I'd say pretty tenacious. If I want to get to something, I'll figure out how to get it.
Is that something people can learn, or is it just you either have it or you don't?
I learned it. So yeah, you can learn it. You start, going through that cycle of discern, behave, achieve, refine. Sometimes people are like, how do you get more resilience? Like, I want my team to be more resilient. Now, the answer isn't, put them in a room and train them for 2 hours and they're going to come out more resilient. The answer is you keep lifting up the bar. People try things and they get knocked down and you make it okay and you dust them off and you put them back in the game and they go through that cycle a few times and all of a sudden you realize 2 years ago we couldn't do this, now we can. And I think I'm pretty tenacious. And actually, the reason I picked that word so quickly is because my wife, who also teaches at Vanderbilt, bumped into the chancellor not that long ago and he walked up and goes, "Your husband is tenacious," because he saw this project kind of come to fruition. So that's why I picked that word. I know it sounds like look at me, I'm tenacious. It's not that. It's just,
no,
I like to hang in the game.
Yeah, man, you're tenacious. You could be successful almost anything.
Yeah, you don't have to have a lot of
especially in
smarts.
business. Like sports, maybe there's a certain, but business, tenacity is like 99% of the equation right there.
Yeah, I think so. It's just hang in there. Oftentimes it will work out. You just got to kind of keep pushing along, especially if you got a good idea and people tell you it's a good idea. I mean, I find like with writing books, for example, there's a lot of people are impressed with people who write books, but most people never read them. That's just the reality of it. We walk by books all day. They don't ring like your phone, so you don't pick them up. Some people will say, oh, I want to write a book. In fact, a lot of people say they want to write a book, but they don't really want to write a book. They just want to be able to go to a cocktail party and say, I want to write a book because it sounds cool, and that's fine. And if that's where you're at, that's cool. Just own that. But there's other people who are like, really like, I have a desire to get up every day and write. That's just what my thing is. And if you hang in there every day, you'll write books. If you focus every day on your business, you'll grow your business. It's just going to come from just sticking in there, sticking at it, and keep going. And recognizing, by the way, if you got a stupid idea, shelf it and move on.
Have you ever have you had to do that with books, or?
Dude, I've got so much stuff written that I'll probably never see.
What's the dumbest idea you've ever come up with?
That chapter I wrote him, Patterson, was probably the dumbest idea.
Yeah, I meant, does he remember that?
Oh yeah, he remembers that.
Yeah. Well, it probably in a way endeared you to him, at least now.
Yeah.
Maybe it caused doubt at the time, but now he's like, I remember that chapter. I mean, half of my relationships is just like reminding each other of the dumb things you did.
Oh yeah. My wife's 100% of her relationship with me.
I'm about to say that's what a good spouse does.
She got 35 years of experience with that.
Yeah.
Actually, when I first got the book deal with Patterson, we were talking to one of his colleagues. He said, he likes you because you're a workhorse. You'll keep trying to figure this thing out. And I take pride in that, I guess.
Yeah, you did. And you wrote, disrupt everything and win. Take control of your future. The proven and effective way to harness change into a force for success. So now you got to go do the podcast tour and the TV show and all that. Is that unique to co-authoring with James Patterson?
Actually, most of them don't go out with him. Clinton does. Dolly did when she wrote a book with them. Most of his co-authors don't go out with him. But this particular one, also, if you look at the cover of the book, so people go buy it and you can look at the cover. But if you look at the cover of the book, it says Patrick Leddin, PhD. Typically, you don't put PhD on the cover of a book. That's not really a typical thing to do. But in this particular sense, it made sense because the audience is probably like, I know James Patterson. Why would he write this book? Okay, who is this guy?
So it had to be like a credibility.
Yeah, associated with the topic of what we were doing research-wise. But it's been a good ride.
What's the harder part, writing or promoting a book?
I actually like both of them. I don't mind them.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. And I'm actually doing a tour. So Franklin Covey, the training company that Stephen Covey started, they turned the book or the basics of the book into a course. So right now I'm going out doing marketing events for them. So tomorrow, this has no time date to it, but for our purposes, tomorrow I'll be in, I go to DC. I do an event there on the next morning. And then I take a train up and I speak at an AI event in New York City that day. So that's a full day of DC morning, afternoon up in New York.
Yeah. Well, look, disruption's coming, right?
Yep.
I mean, it always is here.
I had a dude ask me the other day, I did this masterclass thing for this conference. And at the end of it, during the Q&A, he said, oh, your book timing is so perfect. Everybody's talking about disruption. I said, you know what, man? Put the book on the shelf for 10 years. Don't even release it. Bring it out 10 years from now. You'd be like, your book's perfectly timed. Because the age of disruption is not coming, it's here, and it's going to keep coming. And the more prepared we are for it. What we like to think about is the idea that every organization you talk to these days, their CEOs looking at all this stuff and they go, okay, I know what mountain we need to climb or where we need to go. Strategically, they have that decision kind of formulated in their mind. But then they're looking back at their team and they're going, do I have the people who can get me there? Do I have the culture that can get me there? I have this grand strategy, but can we make it happen? What we're hoping to do through that course at Covey is say, we could teach your leaders and teams how to deal with disruption, how to be rapid in thinking about and agile and thinking about how to apply it. And all of a sudden, you're not one person trying to transform the organization. You've got little experiments going on everywhere.
Yeah, and disruption's always been here. I mean, 80s and the 90s is the personal computer, and then there's the internet, and even social media, like completely disrupted not just our way of life and our attention span, but how marketing is done. And now, obviously, with AIs and language models, it seems to disrupt everything. So this is a great book to get. Disrupt Everything and Win, the proven and effective way to harness change into a force for success. Patrick, can't thank you enough for coming on. For everyone listening, follow Dr. Patrick Leddin for more insights on leadership, disruption, and high-performance habits. You can find him online at patrickleddin.com and on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X at Patrick Leddin. If you found value in this episode, follow me on X, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Just search Kyle Matthews CEO and tune in for more conversations on the Matthews Mentality Podcast, wherever you listen. Patrick, this has been fun. Definitely disruption never stops, and I appreciate you writing this, and I'm excited to see what comes next.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Thank you.